Life has many disappointments. Seems like everybody, every stage of life has experienced disappointments. Some get the job that they've been dreaming about for years, and when they finally get there, they encounter problems they never thought about before. Perhaps angry customers, probably coworkers who don't cooperate. Sometimes it's marriage. There's this great excitement of perfection and everything being wonderful in marriage, but then it's as if the person you marry is not perfect and things aren't as perfect as you thought that they would be. Sometimes parents themselves have kids and know that they're going to be the greatest parent ever, and when the kids grow up, there's this disappointment that they're not perfect. I mean, they end up sinning. Life has disappointments in every category. And some of us as Christians need this as a reminder as well, that just because you became a Christian doesn't mean everything's going to turn out all right. I hear many people say when they get a job at a Christian corporation, they get all excited. This is great. This is going to be perfect. Everybody's a Christian. Everyone's going to love me. And they don't realize everyone else is a normal human being. And every person has problems. And there are still difficulties even at an organization run by Christians. But I'd like for us to take this focus of disappointments, even among Christians, and go just a little bit further. I know when I went to seminary, I had this grandiose idea that it's going to be a great place to go. All these other godly people will be there, and sure enough, there really were some godly people beyond my expectation. But there were a bunch of other people there too. I mean, they were Christians, but they didn't have as much of a heart for God. And it was a big disappointment. And for many seminary students who graduate, we've all been told, if you just apply these 7 steps for success, then everything in ministry is going to go great. You'll be building buildings, and your budgets will grow, and baptisms will burst out, and just so many great miracles will take place because you followed our 7 steps to success. And then we ministers go out and find out things aren't exactly the way we were told. Disappointments exist. And if everyone in here will be honest, we've all had our moments of disappointments with life. They may be directed towards people, but I think if we'll be honest, they're also directed towards God because He's in control of everything. I mean, when it comes to parenting, I know of one couple in Rockport, Michigan, on the very west end of the state. They were so excited about their 14th child to be born. And boy, did they have a disappointment. Not because of a 14th child, but was because it was the 14th son. They wanted a daughter. So after 14 sons, the dad said, well, why don't we take this fairy tale story that we heard and apply it here? They heard about an Indian chief who also had a bunch of boys. So after the miniath boy, he named the boy Sheboygan. She is a boy again. Which, by the way, Rockport is on the far western end of the state. If you go across the Lake Michigan, a city on the east coast of Wisconsin is called Sheboygan. So they literally, truly named their son, their 14th son, in the middle name, thank goodness, Sheboygan, because of the disappointment about not having a daughter. We have all had moments of disappointments, and we all need to be reminded that God has something greater. And I confess I've been guilty of this as well, that when we want to tell a story, we want to get across a point, say we're going to preach a message on prayer, let's go for it all. Let's give illustrations of George Mueller. And when all the people in the church pray, they'll become just like George Mueller. And we'll start up 55 new orphanages. Wait a minute, how's that going to take place? But we teach people how to preach like George Mueller, so we all do like he does. And then when we want to preach like, how do you be a preacher, or an evangelist, say D.L. Moody. Let's teach people, how did he do it? Well, how did he do it? He made a vow that every day he would witness and witness until he led at least one person to the Lord. And he was able to follow through with that through most of his life. There was at least one person who became a Christian every day of his life. That wouldn't work too well today in North Korea or Somalia or Sudan. And what do we do as Christians when that doesn't take place? Well, it must be that I didn't understand the 7 steps of success properly. I must be less of a human being than other people. I must not be doing things right. God must hate me. The focus of today's message, we oftentimes have this high-profile view of what the Christian life is, and truthfully, it's not that way. I mean, we could take other people like David Livingstone, who went down to Africa, and he had this incredible ministry and he was a pioneer, went to new areas, and he was the very first person to see Victoria Falls, probably. He's given credit for that, so I had all these great adventures and started missionary work. And then we want to teach people how to preach. You preach the policies of Charles Spurgeon. And by the way, one of his policies was he would lie down after a week of bringing all this information in. While he would lie down relaxed on his type of lazy boy, his wife would read his notes to him or read commentaries to him. So while he's lying there, he's compiling all these thoughts and formulating his message. If you only do this, you can have a great message too and preach like Charles Spurgeon. But it doesn't take place. This is not reality. When we go through the Bible, what stories do we pull out? You know, those that are more positive. But let's put a pause on this introduction and go straight to 1 Kings chapter 22. This is our third time to address this passage. In the last few weeks, we mentioned that this is King Ahab, who was told that in some time of his life he would die and that the dogs would lick his blood in the valley of Jezreel. We've already had that message, payday someday. And then time after that, we looked at King Jehoshaphat. We looked at this passage again. And in both cases, those kings experienced big moments. But I want us to look at another person in the passage, Micaiah, who doesn't appear on the front cover of too many magazines. He's not mentioned as the greatest of leaders and the greatest of Christians because he didn't have kids to come back to life after he prayed for them. He didn't remove mountains. He didn't have fire come down from heaven. Why? Was he less of a human being? Let's look at some disappointments that would be viewed as disappointments from an earthly perspective. The first one is in verse 8. Let's read the verse first. It says, the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, but I hate him, because he does not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. He is Micaiah, son of Imlah. The first disappointment is being hated by others. You know, sometimes we Christians think, boy, if we just become a Christian, everyone's going to love us. We're just going to be the best friend for everybody. We're going to be the next person to receive the key to the city because we've made such a magnificent change for our community. I mean, we'll be the most popular person. That is a very common belief for Christians. And then all of a sudden, why are people hating us? I thought to be a Christian, everything would be wonderful and rosy. It doesn't happen that way. Truth be told, the more you become like Christ, the more some people hate you. There are disappointments in the Christian life. Let's look at the next one that we will highlight in verse 13. And again, we will read the verse first. Then the messenger who went to summon Micaiah spoke to him, saying, Behold now, the words of the prophets are uniformly favorable to the king. Please let your word be like the word of one of them, and speak favorably. Here's the situation. Ahab wants to know whether or not he should go fight. He calls 400 prophets, and the prophets say, yes, go do it. You will live and be victorious. Jehoshaphat said, isn't there someone to speak for the Lord? Then this guy comes along. And then as they're getting Micaiah to come speak, they're saying, no, all 400 people have said such and such. You need to say the same thing they did. We don't care about your convictions. We don't care about your beliefs. We don't care what God has said to you, if God even exists. They said, just tell us what the king wants to hear. So the second disappointment that you could mention is pressured to conform. Society says, we don't care what you believe in. We don't care what's going on. You do what we say. Every time I've gotten a job in the secular world, I have told them, I will do anything you want me to do, but I cannot accept a job that requires me to work on Sundays. And that's been understood. If I already know ahead of time you have to work on Sunday, I don't even apply. You don't even need to argue. But I went to one place, and they said, oh, don't worry about it. You're just going to be the stockroom coordinator. And you have to work Monday through Friday, so don't even worry about that. It's no big deal, no problem. A few months later, by the way, Randy, we have all of our staff meetings on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. You need to join us. And I came here under the understanding that I would never have to be, but it's just for the meeting. I didn't go. And then they kept pushing. This next promotion is so big. Why? We're giving a particular name for the sale of our plates and our cups and our napkins. You need to be there so that you can understand what's going on. Turns out I never did because I'm back in the stockroom. I wasn't out on the floor selling the stuff. But they kept pushing, and they said, you really need to, just this one time. Okay. I'll go there just this one time. But those of you with age should know by now, you give in an inch, they want more. The next meeting for the next month, they said, oh, we have another meeting, like we always have once a month. Randy, you need to be there. And by the way, the fact that you showed up last time means you can be here every month, so we expect you to come back every month. To which I told her, we've already had this discussion before. There are three options. I forgot what one of those three were that I gave her, but my first one was, I would rather lose this job and have nowhere to go and have to live at the rescue mission so I can be off on Sunday than be here. Second, you already know, we've had this discussion, that if I take you to court, I will win. The federal government requires me the freedom to have a day off, unless there are emergencies, which is understandable. And then a week later, she has me sign all this paperwork saying that for religious reasons, I don't need to be there for Sunday. Now, she was off the hook, which then I understood something. She wasn't pressuring me to do what she wanted. She was pressuring me to get the pressure off of her because they were pressuring her. The bottom line is, you become a Christian, other people, even Christians sometimes, will pressure you. Just join us. Just join us. Had some people call me up, some single adults. Hey, we're going to go watch a G-rated movie. If you join us, maybe we'll watch Lassie. They laugh, ha ha. So I said, okay, I'll join you this time. I joined them, and they said, well, there's so many people who want to see an R-rated movie from our church single adult group, that we're going to compromise and let's go to a PG-rated movie. Once you give in, the pressure just keeps going. It's a disappointment to see you're being dragged down by different people. The third area to mention for this passage begins in verse 24. Let me go ahead and give you the heading since I might forget that. But this is being punished for doing what's right. Micaiah has already spoken the truth. And he said, my heavenly Father told me this is what is taking place. So now look at verse 24. Zedekiah, one of the other bad prophets, the son of Chenaanah, came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek and jokingly said, how did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak to you? Ha ha. Skip down to verse 26. Then the king of Israel, whose name was Ahab, said, take Micaiah and return him to Amon, the governor of the city, and to Joash, the king's son, and say, thus says the king, put this man in prison and feed him sparingly with bread and water until I return safely. You take a stand for the Lord, you will be hated. You will be pressured to do evil, and you will be punished somehow, some way. But that's not what we're taught when we become Christians so often. Oh, just become a Christian. Everything is wonderful. All your problems disappear. I mean, I even attended the 7 Steps to Success seminar. Certainly everything is going to be just right. The church is going to grow. The people are all going to be totally loving and dedicated. We'll have to build new buildings every year for the incredible growth. That's what many people believe. And even worse, when it doesn't take place, the pressure continues. Now, after I turned in my paperwork to the printers on Thursday nights, I had another point that I would have liked to have added, and that is another problem is you may not even become famous. Micaiah probably rarely ever gets a message preached about him. But boy, we preach about John the Baptist and about Elijah and Moses and Jesus and Simon Peter. Micaiah's wondering, what about me? Am I less of a human being? Is there something less about me that I don't get put on the front page of the newspaper? They don't talk about me on the radio. I'm never used as an illustration of greatness by the preachers. He wasn't famous. I mean, there's so many disappointments that Christians could, and most often, accept. I'd like for us to look at a few other examples. How about Hebrews chapter 11? You remember that chapter? Where the vast majority of the people at the beginning, because of faith, Abel was able to do this. Because of faith, Noah did that. Because of his faith, Moses was able to accomplish this, and Abraham and David. And then at the very end of the chapter it says, however, there were some other people who were persecuted because of their faith. They were cut in two because of their faith. Was there something less about them than the others who were mentioned at the start of the chapter? Are they worse of a human being? Are they not as godly, so God had some inferior position for them? The answer is no. Let's look at another guy. One of our International Mission Board missionaries named Nick Ripken. He goes out, his first place of service is in Malawi, Africa. Whole tribes are becoming Christians. I mean, this is great. Hundreds of people are becoming Christians at a time. Satan probably put thoughts in his head like, he'll probably be president of the International Mission Board someday. Why, he has applied these 7 steps to success so well, he's actually discovered an 8th where he's even more successful than the successful. While Satan's probably filling his head with, boy, I'm just a great person. I'm going to be the standard for starting churches. Then things happened. Malaria takes place, so they sent him to South Africa. All of a sudden, he's hated like never before. And then other problems take place, and they pray, and they really felt the Lord wanted him to go to Somalia. So they go there, and they're still applying the same principles, the 7 steps to success, whatever they were. But things are different now. When they arrived in Somalia, there were 150 total Christians in the whole country. When he left, there were 4. Well, I don't guess we'll ever invite him to our church because he must not be a very good missionary. There must be something less about him because he can't reach people. I'm sure Satan had those thoughts pound him. He for sure stated that he was harassed by evangelists who said, "You're wasting denominational money by going to Somalia. You give me the money they're spending to you, and I'll be able to start a whole new church in the country." He's hearing these remarks, probably wondering, what's happened? Why were things so successful in Malawi, but I'm here in Somalia and things just aren't the same? God never promised everything would be the same. He never promised that there were some 7 mysterious, secret, mysterious steps of success that if we apply them, that we become successful humanly. Let's pick another person. How about a Muslim who became a Christian and he's the only Christian he knows? And finally, after about 20 years of this frustration, he said, "God, please show to me you're real, please." And he really felt the Lord through a vision to go make these long travels. He traveled and walked up to a man, and this is the guy. He taps him on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me, are you a Christian?" Well, in Muslim territory. And who was that person? Nick Repkin. He's thinking, "Oh no, do I answer the question yes?" And they arrest me. So he answers, and the guy tells his story. He says, "I'm the only Christian anywhere near me. I pray, I cry out to God regularly. And I said to him, 'Would you please prove yourself to be real?' And he sent me all the way over here to meet you." To which the former Muslim said, "I'm now content. I know God loves me. I'll go back to my life." And he went back. I mean, wouldn't it be easy for us to say there's something wrong with that guy? He hasn't applied the 7 steps of success. There must be something inferior about him. Well, let me mention the biggest loser of all. His name was Jesus. I mean, he came to earth, and he came as a Jew, the most hated of all people. And then he was poor on top of that. Oh, what a reject. When he was in the temple on the 8th day, his parents gave the absolute cheapest offering, 2 turtle doves, which was the requirement for the absolute poorest of people. Then on top of that, the religious leaders knew that his daddy was not his real daddy, so he had to endure the mockery of his life. At least we're not the child of immorality, fornication. That's John 8:41. And then as he grows up, he's trying to build a relationship with his family, and he's saying, "Except you eat of my flesh and my blood, you shall not have any life in you." And his own family members are turning their heads at the dinner table saying, "He's crazy." And in Mark 3:21, it states point blank that the people, whom many translations say means his family, said, "He's a lunatic. He's crazy. Get him away from the crowds lest they think we're the same way." Then he goes to Nazareth, and the people he was raised up with for 30 years hear him say that he's Messiah, and they're ready to kill him. I mean, he did have some bright moments. He raised some people back to life. He healed some people. But then his own followers turned against him. One of them betrayed him. He ended up being arrested and beaten, and then he was crucified. I mean, what a loser. And some of you are fighting me internally with tension, saying, "Why would you say that about him?" And my response is, why do you believe that about yourself? When you don't get what you think is best and what you think is right, and you experience what you think are disappointments, and the truth is, God causes all things to work together for good. Let's go back to this same passage and look at 4 areas in which Micaiah responded correctly. I think it's amazing. I don't know that I would have responded this positively. He should deserve more messages for his godly response. So this will now focus on what should we do during seeming disappointments. And the first one is in verse 14. He should keep obeying. Keep obeying the Lord. Verse 14 reads, "But Micaiah said, As the Lord lives, what the Lord says to me, that I shall speak." Whatever God told him to do, he would do. You know, our response is, well, if my life is just disappointing, if our church isn't going to grow, if my Bible study isn't going to grow, if I can't have more people reading my blogs, if I can't have more people calling me up and inviting me to lead seminars, I'm talking about you guys being invited to lead seminars and lady seminars and working side by side with Beth Moore and Priscilla Schauer. And it's easy for us to say, I'm not that popular. What are we supposed to do? And based on this first thing, you keep doing what the Lord has called you to do. He didn't call you to be these other people. He's called you to be who you are. It's easy for us to say, I'm going to do nothing and I'm going to wait on God to catch up with me. The truth of the matter is, God is the one who's waiting on us to catch up with him. And if we're just sitting around waiting for everyone else to do the work, nothing will take place. God has given us callings. He has given us responsibilities, things to do, and we are to obey completely. Anytime we quit, that is suicide, at least emotional suicide. If there's a sense of God doesn't know what he's doing, I'll just quit following this Christian lifestyle. We are not to quit. We are to continue doing what God has told us to do. Now look at verses 24 and 25. This is rather remarkable. We are to speak and live the truth with love. Remember I read a moment ago, verse 24, that Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, came near and struck Micaiah on the cheek and said, how did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak to you? Look how Micaiah responded. Behold, you shall see on that day when you enter an inner room to hide yourself. Now, you know, reading the Bible is similar to texting in the sense that it's just words. You don't get to hear the person say it. You don't get to hear their emotions. You don't hear their inflections. But when I read this, I don't hear Micaiah being angry at all. He's just been slapped in the face. He's just been mocked. His heavenly Father has been mocked. And his response is genuine love. Oh, you'll see when this day comes. He was gentle towards those who spoke harshly. Let's go to a third area. This is a biggie for all of us. Remember your calling. In verse 28, we can see, in a sense, that we are to remember our calling. Micaiah said, if you indeed return safely, the Lord has not spoken by me. And he said, listen, all you people. He was saying, God sent me here to say this. It was his calling. We need to live our lives in such a way that when we wake up in the mornings, we sense the Lord telling us, you need to do this, 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 and this. So that when we do those 4 projects, we're doing it because we are called to do it, not because we thought it was some great way of living our lives. If we do not receive this awareness that our life is a calling, we'll quit. We'll give up. When it's a calling from the Lord, we follow through to the end. It's not our choice. Our Heavenly Father has told us what to do. We just keep going, even though we may not see the end results. When you look at it, that it's God's reputation at stake, not yours. To a point, God's not interested in your reputation as much as he's interested in his. And the interesting thing is, the more you give attention to his reputation, he will start building up your reputation. I mean, you put your focus on the Lord. Can I add this extra little twist? I wondered about how to present this if we had had visitors today, so now I can say this freely. How do visitors look for a church? Most of them want to find a church that will do what? Meet their own needs. We want a church where people will be our age, that they will have things for our kids, ministries for our family, things for us to do. Remember when I was a kid and I worked on the bus ministry, we would visit the kids. Hey, you going to come to church tomorrow? Yeah, great. We'd hand them a piece of bubble gum. Just kind of a way of saying, hey, we're glad to see you again. But then we'd go to their house the next day and they're not there. And we ask, what happened? You didn't join us. Well, this other church gives us a free meal. So that's why they went to the other church. They have activities for our kids. The whole mindset is, what can I get out of the church? When we have a calling, we don't care what church we join, because we're joining the church God has told us to join. We go there to serve, not to receive. Now, I understand there is a balance there. We do receive from others. But if our primary motive is to leech from the church, we're a miserable person. But if we go to give, that ministry never ends. There's always more to give. When we have a calling, it is easier to live for the Lord and not be disappointed. Because I'm doing what he said. My boss said do this. Whatever happens is my boss's fault. I don't have to worry. I just obey him. I'd like to move to the last point, which is another really big one. Remember God's sovereignty. Let's look at verses 19 to 23, and don't push it necessarily to the nth degree, but get the principle that's applied in the passage. When Micaiah was speaking, and they said, okay, Micaiah, tell us, should we go fight the Assyrians or not? And Micaiah kept telling them, don't do it, don't do it. But here's his story, verse 19. Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right and on his left. The Lord said, who will entice Ahab to go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one of the spiritual beings said this, while another said that. And then one of the spirits came forward and stood before the Lord and said, I will entice him. Then the Lord said to him, how? And he said, I will go out and be a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. Then he said, you are to entice him and also prevail. Go and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a deceiving spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and the Lord has proclaimed disaster against you. Some people spend way too much time studying this passage. Was God really ignorant and he needed to ask these spirits what the answers to the questions were? That's not the point. It's the same as God going to Adam, where are you? He knew where Adam was. He wanted to draw it out of Adam to confess. The story behind this, or the meaning, is that God is in complete control, and he can do whatever he wants to. God arranged for the northern kingdom of Israel to fight against Syria so that Ahab would die. That's the point. God is sovereign. He's in control of everything. And when we understand that, life is different. I mean, to me, one of the biggest moments is God sending Jonah to Nineveh. This is a waste of time. I just wish they would die. He's all upset. God never told him why he sent him there. It was time for Israel to be judged by Assyria. If Jonah had not preached to the people, the Israelites would have been hacked and whacked and chopped into pieces 1 billion times by the Assyrians. And God in his graciousness and love wanted to turn the hearts of the Assyrians just before conquering Israel. But God never said that to Jonah. God just wanted Jonah's obedience. Just do what I say. He doesn't tell us the end result. Another story took place when a guy named Robert Moffat, actually a fairly popular person, who was an evangelist, a missionary down in South Africa. He saw the need to get more people to come help him. So he went back to his home country of Israel, of Great Britain. I wouldn't even call it, I think I was saying England. He wanted to go back to England and tell the people, we need more missionaries. We need more missionaries. So he put together the message that he felt the Lord wanted him to preach. From Proverbs 8:4 that says, unto you, O men, I call. His whole purpose was to reach men. Come down to this dangerous territory, the jungles, the harsh weather, and be a missionary for the Lord to reach people. Well, when he arrived in Great Britain, all of a sudden this huge storm came through. It was very cold. So when he went to this first service, very few people showed up. Even worse, it was only women. His message was to appeal to men. God, I thought you told me to preach to men. He said, what do I do? Do I change the topic? What do I do? He said, well, God said speak it, so he spoke it. What he did not know was there was a boy up in the balcony handling the bellows of the organ, whatever that is. So he's operating the organ system back there. Robert Moffat preaches his message with energy, only to find out after the service there was this little boy who was willing to commit to be a missionary. The boy went to school, became a medical doctor, learned how to be a missionary as best as possible, and went down to Africa. And we know that guy as David Livingstone. In fact, he was such a close person to the Moffats, he ended up marrying one of the Moffats' daughters. You have no idea what's going on in your life when you think you're just a disappointment. Do you think Moffat was up there going, this is just a waste of my time to preach to all these women? But God had a specific message for one particular person, had nothing to do for or against the women that day. But God knew that Livingstone would be there, so God had a message for the boy. And by the way, if the women were present, they were involved in God's sovereignty somehow. I've heard of many stories of women who felt a calling to be a missionary, could not go. They ended up having to adopt someone else's kids. And to their surprise, 20 years later, all those kids ended up going to the very place God called them to serve. Do not view your circumstances as disappointments. It's totally God orchestrating an amazing picture that you don't have any clue what it's about. Won't it be exciting someday when we go to heaven and we look back and we're able to see what God was doing all along? I conclude with these words from Johnny Erickson Tata, who said, many of you out there are listening to me speak on the radio, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I'm more blessed than Johnny, am more blessed than you folks are. She says, you don't understand. I've already received my blessing here on earth by being famous, having books, having attention, whatever all that means. She said, those of you out there who will never be known, you will be the ones truly blessed in eternity because you stuck it out without any of that extra reinforcement. And I challenge all of you at Cornersburg Baptist Church, no matter what's going on in the world, no matter what goes on in our community, in our church, wherever, you commit to the Lord and do whatever He says. He's in control. He will do a good work through you. Would you bow your heads for prayer?